The question today is whether we can prevent and stop hypertension by reducing sodium from our diet. And if not, then what can we do to lower hypertension? So let's take a look at exactly how that high blood pressure impacts your health. Now, we all know that our arteries carry blood from the heart to other parts of the body. Blood pressure is that internal pressure of blood rushing through your arteries and pushing against the inner walls of these arteries. Now, why do we care so much about that high blood pressure though? Well, for starters, high blood pressure can cause serious damage to your blood vessels, your heart, your brain, and your kidneys. Now, under normal conditions, in an otherwise healthy person, blood flow is fairly steady. And based on physical activities or your diet, your blood pressure will rise and fall normally to meet the physical demands of the body or the digestive needs of the body as you go throughout your day. Now, for example, if you are exercising, then yes, of course, your blood pressure will increase and make sure that your working muscles are getting an adequate supply of oxygen and nutrients. If you are healthy, your arteries should be elastic, meaning they should be able to withstand blood pressure by either constricting or dilating based on physiological needs at the time. Now, when you chronically have high blood pressure, your arteries that carry blood from the heart to other vital parts of your body are constantly strained, and over time they lose their elasticity and become stiff. When these arteries become less elastic, they struggle to maintain an adequate blood supply to those vital organs, which can lead to serious complications like heart disease, kidney diseases. When these blood vessels lose their elasticity, they become more susceptible to damage as well under pressure, under any kind of pressure, because they can no longer constrict and dilate as easily as before. So at this point, any drastic blood pressure changes that would otherwise be considered normal can now cause damage to that artery's inner lining, that inner wall. We call that inner lining, by the way, we call that the endothelial layer. And the damages on that inner wall lining, we call them lesions. So you can have multiple lesions throughout your vascular system or your blood vessels. And these lesions cause your body to react, and in an attempt to protect you from these lesions and to repair them, the body ends up producing what we call fatty streaks. Okay? Now, these fatty streaks are formed in the damaged regions of the blood vessel wall, and they can eventually progress to become plaques. Now, let's take a closer look at this picture of your artery to understand how these fatty streaks are formed, how these plaques are formed, and why it is so significant. Now, these are your endothelium layers. Okay, these two right here are your endothelium layers. This is the inner lining of the blood vessel. Now, under normal conditions, your white blood cells, your monocyte in this case, they do not typically bind onto the endothelium, and they do not typically squeeze their way across those endothelium lining. Okay? Now, they mostly flow freely, and they do their normal job of eliminating foreign substances like germs that invade the body, or eliminating other toxic chemicals. Okay? Now, when that inner wall lining is damaged, when that inner endothelium lining is damaged with lesions as a result of chronic high blood pressure and loss of elasticity, those endothelial cells are able to express receptors on their surfaces, okay, that will attract these monocytes, your immune cells, get them to roll over, get to the site of a lesion, and squeeze their way through that endothelium lining. Okay? They squeeze their way through them into that subendothelial space. Okay, now under normal conditions, in a healthy person, that endothelial wall, they prevent any cell from the blood to leak out of those blood vessels, because each of these endothelial cells, they are joined closely and held together by what we call tight junctions. But when they're damaged, those tight junctions, they become loose and they allow other substances to squeeze through them and go into the subendothelial space. This is exactly how your monocyte is able to squeeze between that endothelial cell lining and go beneath them. Okay? Now, once in that subendothelial space, what your body is going to do is to use LDL that is readily available, combining it with reactive oxygen species to form oxidized LDL. Let's take a minute to take a look at exactly where the LDL comes from and where the reactive oxygen species, or ROS for short, come from. LDL stands for low density lipoprotein. Every time I say LDL, think about bad cholesterol. Okay? Now, eating a diet that is high in trans fat, saturated fat, what's going to happen is they're going to increase the bioavailability of LDL in your body, which means that there will be more LDL circulating in your blood than normal. Now, ROS, what happens is the body naturally produces them. Okay? Why the body needs them is to be able to kill and eliminate cells that are damaged or cells that have become mutated. So your body actually needs them. But the body has a delicate balance between making all these oxidizing agents like ROS and maintaining a level of antioxidants in the body. Now, other factors that cause a high amount of oxidation in the body or an elevated amount of ROS is consuming too much sugar in your diet. This is going to be the big one, the sugar in your diet. And using too much vegetable oil for cooking. Pollution in the environment is another big one, and many chemicals in the food that we eat also produce a high amount of ROS in the body. Alcohol consumption, smoking, all of these are known to produce excessive amounts of ROS in the body. But most importantly, if you are not consuming enough vegetables, you will not get enough antioxidants and you will have an elevated amount of ROS in the body. But let's get back to our blood vessel for a second. Now we understand exactly where the LDL comes from. We understand where your ROS comes from. And remember that they will combine and form oxidized LDL. Now, remember, the monocyte has been able to squeeze through that endothelium lining and get into that subendothelial space. Now, what's going to happen is your monocyte will engulf the oxidized LDL in an attempt to protect you. And in doing so, it will differentiate and become macrophages, which will continue accumulating oxidized LDL until they eventually become foam cells. Now, these foam cells are able to accumulate under that endothelial cell layer to form fatty streaks, all right? And over time, they're going to continue to grow and eventually form a plaque. Over time, plaque growth can significantly reduce blood flow to major organs, or if they get big enough, those plaque formations can narrow down the artery enough to form blood clots and disrupt your blood and oxygen supply to major organs. They can also grow big enough to burst under pressure and release that fat accumulation inside the foam cells and travel through your blood vessels until they get to smaller blood vessels and completely block blood circulation to those major organs like your brain, kidneys, or the heart. If one of these blockages happen in the coronary artery, you cannot supply the heart with oxygen and nutrients. That's how you get a heart attack. All right? Now, if the blockage happens in an artery that supplies the brain with blood and oxygen, you get a stroke. The bottom line is having blood pressure changes throughout the day because of activity levels, stress levels, your diet, water consumption, all those things are normal. The body is designed to deal with those normal blood pressure changes. What we're talking about here is chronically elevated blood pressure throughout the day for a long period of time. There is an overwhelming amount of research that points to the fact that sodium does increase your blood pressure, at least temporarily. Sodium is able to do that because of its osmolarity. It attracts water, so it can cause water retention in the body. It increases your blood volume and consequently increases your blood pressure on the inner walls of your blood vessels. But in a healthy person, typically, that is not a serious problem. Your body can deal with that occasionally higher than usual amount of sodium and then return to your normal levels. The problem is that with individuals that are already at higher risk for hypertension, when they consume large amounts of sodium throughout the day over a long period of time, the blood pressure stays elevated throughout most part of the day. But sodium alone is not responsible for hypertension. It is rather a combination of multiple factors that leads to hypertension. Your body actually needs the sodium because it works with other minerals like potassium to maintain electrolyte balance. Now, most physicians will suggest just taking a high blood pressure medication, or they might tell you to decrease your sodium intake in your diet, maybe drink more water and exercise more often. But the truth is, in most cases, the sodium alone is not the reason why you have chronic high blood pressure. So just reducing the sodium alone is not going to be enough to help you prevent or to fix your high blood pressure. Okay? There are many other factors at play here that we need to take a look at. Now, keep in mind that sodium and salt are two different things. Salt is sodium chloride, and most people can safely consume about 4,000 milligrams of sodium chloride or salt in a day. But you do not want to consume sodium on its own. You need to consume it as a complex, like sodium chloride. So sea salt, for example, is a good one, sodium chloride. Now here's a few things that you can do today to stop your hypertension. Let's take a look at the minerals first. Rather than just focusing on eliminating all sources of sodium in your diet, you should focus on getting an adequate amount of healthy salt in your diet. Himalayan salt is a very good option because they have less chemicals and less pollutants in them. And sea salt is a fine option as well. But it's important to make sure that you are also getting the other minerals like potassium and magnesium from your diet. Still stick to the recommended intakes for salt and sodium, and that is 4,000 milligrams of salt per day for adults and less than 2,000 milligrams of sodium on its own per day for adults. But just remember, limiting sodium alone is not the answer. Most people end up consuming too much sodium and not enough of potassium, which then creates an imbalance in the body. And that's the problem, okay? Now you have to make sure that you are consuming at least 8 to 10 cups of veggies a day to increase your potassium and magnesium intakes while eating the right amount of salt. The overall balance of these minerals is what will help you control your high blood pressure efficiently. Okay, it is not as simple as just restricting sodium on its own and you fix your hypertension. It doesn't work that way. The next is fats. I'm sure you know this already, but you should reduce the amount of trans fat and saturated fats that you consume because that will upset your blood lipid profile. You need to maintain an elevated amount of HDL and a lower amount of LDL in your body. Okay, HDL is the good cholesterol, so you want to maintain a high amount of it. Now, where you get the good cholesterol from is from all that unsaturated fat from seafood, nuts, seeds, and so on. I would also recommend to take an omega-3 supplement, because having the correct balance of omega-3 supplements in your body will help reduce inflammation and regulate the ratio of LDL and HDL. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link in the description below for things that I personally take and what I would recommend for you. Okay. The next big thing, of course, is sugar. Above all, I would be more concerned about the amount of refined carbs and sugars that you consume. All right, because eventually this is what is going to increase the likelihood of insulin resistance. And there are numerous studies out there that have linked insulin resistance to cardiovascular dysfunctions. All right, the increase in blood glucose levels, so increasing insulin resistance, is what will further accelerate that loss of elasticity of your blood vessels. All right, so significantly reducing the amount of refined sugars that you consume will have a much larger impact than just reducing sodium to stop hypertension. Okay, stress is another one. Now, there's no evidence that directly links stress as one of the causes for long-term chronic high blood pressure or hypertension, but it can definitely temporarily cause a steep rise in your blood pressure. Okay, but when that stress goes away, your body should be able to bring the blood pressure back to normal levels as well. That being said, repeated short-term spikes in blood pressure can definitely cause damage to your blood vessels, your heart, your kidneys, and your brain over time, especially if you are already at higher risk for hypertension. So if you are under chronic stress, I would seriously consider taking a look at your lifestyle, taking a look at your stressors, and see what you can do to minimize them. Okay? The next thing I would like you to look at are vitamins. Vitamin D3, vitamin C are one of those things that you should be taking pretty much every day. Okay, these both can help you manage and regulate your blood pressure. During summertime, just go out in the sun a little bit. You're gonna get some vitamin D3. During wintertime, I would definitely recommend a supplement for them. But in general, taking them daily will definitely help. The next thing that I think you should know about is L-arginine. L-arginine helps make nitric oxide, which is a very well-known vasodilator. What that means is it will help relax the muscle of your blood vessel wall, causing them to dilate. Okay, and when that happens, it increases blood flow in your arteries and help reduce blood pressure. And finally, I will recommend 2 natural remedies that you can start using today to stop your hypertension. Number 1 is garlic. Garlic contains a substance called gamma-glutamyl-cysteine, which is a natural ACE inhibitor. It also has another substance called allicin, which is known to give garlic that distinct odor, but when you combine those 2 substances together, they give garlic that ability to dilate your arteries and therefore lowers your blood pressure. Beets are the other one that are really good for you. Beets are rich in a natural chemical called nitrates. Now, when you consume nitrates, the body has biological pathways to convert those nitrates into nitric oxide. Again, the nitric oxide will help your inner artery wall. It will help them relax, dilate, and lower your blood pressure. All right? Now, ultimately, what you're looking at is not a single source that will help prevent hypertension or reduce your hypertension. You're looking at an overall lifestyle change, and you're looking at a pretty comprehensive dietary adjustment. Okay, so remember, take a look at all the things that I have listed above. Try to make sure that you're incorporating this into your health protocol, and this will definitely help you either prevent hypertension, or if you already have it, help reduce it, manage it better. Well, thank you for listening. I will see you in the next video.